Welcome back to Echoes of the Past, the podcast where we break down history's most pivotal events, their origins, and their long-lasting effects on the world. I'm Kendall Herthel.
And I'm Pearl Malloy.
And I am Jackson Glover. Today we're diving into one of the most tragic and transformative moments in Russian history, the events of Bloody Sunday in 1905.
It's a story about protest, hope, betrayal, and violence. Once that gives us insight into how societies under pressure can spiral into change.
Bloody Sunday took place on January 22, 1905, in St. Petersburg, the Russian Empire's capital at the time. It began as a peaceful march led by a group of workers demanding their wages, better working conditions, and political reform.
The march was led by Father Georgy Gapon, a well-respected priest and advocate for workers' rights. They had hoped to present their grievances directly to Tsar Nicholas II, believing that he would hear their demands.
But what started as a peaceful protest quickly turned deadly. The Tsar's troops were stationed in the area, and when the protesters approached the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, they were met with violence. The soldiers opened fire on the crowd.
Estimates vary, but historians believe that between 200 and 500 people were killed that day, with thousands wounded. It was shocking because protesters weren't armed, and they were very unprepared for violence.
The protesters carried crosses, icons, and their petitions, signifying that this was supposed to be a non-violent appeal to the Tsar's sense of justice and leadership. But the massacre sent shockwaves across the empire.
And this is crucial. The brutality of the response exposed the stark divide between the ruling elite and the suffering masses. Many workers saw the Tsar as their father, a symbol of protection and guidance, but on January 22nd, that perception was shattered.
So what led to this? What pushed thousands of workers into the streets in the first place?
Roots go back decades. The Russian Empire in the early 20th century was dealing with rapid industrialization, vast inequality, and political stagnation. Most workers lived in an abject poverty, working grueling hours in harsh conditions.
And add to the failed wars, most notably the Russo-Japanese War from 1904 to 1905. That defeat left many Russian citizens disillusioned with the Tsarist government. They were looking for change, but the Tsar had been resistant to reform.
The 1905 unrest wasn't just about economics. It was also about representation. The Russian Empire was a massive multi-ethnic empire with very little political representations for its diverse subjects. Reform movements were calling for reforms like a national assembly, better conditions, and legal rights.
But the Tsarist system was unwilling to compromise. When economic and political demands collided with a rigid monarchy, the pressure came to a boiling point. Bloody Sunday was the result of this unaddressed discontent.
The Tsar misjudged his people. Many believed he would act as a protector and reformer, but his response showed the Tsar's unwillingness to bend. The soldiers' shooting reinformed distrust in the monarchy.
So what happened after that horrific day?
While the immediate result was a wave of violence and strikes across Russia, the events sparked a national movement against the monarchy, and workers, peasants, and intellectuals began demanding reforms.
This led to the October Manifesto. Later that year, a document that was promised some reforms, including the creation of a parliamentary body called the Duma. However, the reforms were half-hearted and insufficient, leaving many with the impression that the Tsar was not truly committed to change.
The aftermath of Bloody Sunday paved the way for a period of revolutionary activity, including widespread strikes, demonstrations, and peasant uprisings. While it didn't immediately overthrow the Tsar's regime, it created a precondition of unrest and discontent that would lead to the 1917 revolutions.
The massacre also had long-term effects on Russian society. Many people lost faith in Tsar as a legitimate leader, and the Tsar's unwillingness to grant reforms forced Russia into a cycle of revolution, war, and political instability.
Even now, Bloody Sunday is remembered not as just a tragic event, but as a symbol of the struggle between the authoritarian power and popular demands for justice and equality.
So, What can we learn from Bloody Sunday over a century later?
It reminds us that political and social reform can't come through force alone. When the state resorts to violence to silence peaceful protests, the repercussions can be long-lasting.
It also reminds us of the power of collective action. People risking their lives to demand fair wages, dignity, and political rights can shape history, though it can come at a terrible cost.
History isn't just about the grand revolutions or major wars. It's about these smaller, seemingly simple moments, marches, protests, and petitions that grow into movements. Bloody Sunday was tragic, but it showed that people's hopes can be a catalyst for change, even when faced with great oppression.
And here's the lesson. Violence can silence voices, but it rarely quells the underlying cause of unrest. Societies need dialogue, reform, and genuine change to address the demands of their people.
That's it for today's episode of Echoes of the Past. We hope this discussion gave you a deeper understanding of how Bloody Sunday changed Russian history and the world.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us on your favorite podcast platform.
Until next time, keep reflecting on history and its lessons.
Take care, everyone.